All right, everyone. So welcome back to OnRamp. This is officially week 2 of the cohort. So it's so great to see familiar faces, some new faces. Last week with Caitlin, we kicked off all about customer development and having great customer interviews, getting validation for our customers, and really learning about problems. So that focused on this like empathize and defining our problem segment right here. Today, we're going to take a deep dive into ideation and prototyping and testing out prototypes. So there's a lot of different ways to prototype. Obviously there's physical products, there's digital products, services, as well as your business model, which I think a lot of founders forget about, is that you are constantly prototyping your business model as well too. So we're going to go through things. As always, feel free to put questions into like the chat if you're on Zoom, and feel free to just interrupt me if you have any questions. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jessie Garcia. I'm the founder in residence. And I've been working on my startup for about 8 years now, and we make a hardware product. So that's definitely my specialty, but I'm happy to go through like other examples as well. All right, so from last week, did anyone do any customer interviews with people with what you learned from Caitlin's class by any chance? I would love, if someone did, I would love to hear feedback on that and how it went. All right, I was giving people a chance virtually.
I can share.
Oh, Brendan, that would be great.
I'm at a stage where we're not. I can hear my echo.
Yeah, 1 second, we're fixing that.
No worries. We're at the growth stage. We're already like live. We have an MVP live. So it's not really user interviews for us right now, although well, it's more like just seeing how they react, questions we get. I always jump at those opportunities.
Yeah, Brandon, can you hold up 1 second?
Sure.
I think if you turn the computer's volume way down.
It's muted.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah. Brandon, do you want to try again?
Yeah. Should I start from the beginning?
What? I'm so sorry.
Hybrid's really hard.
I think you're right.
We're prototyping.
I think you're onto
something.
Yeah.
This is the audio.
Is it this?
Anyone else in the room have a microphone or speaker on?
There's a microphone somewhere in here.
All right.
No,
This.
it's supposed to be Logi group.
Yeah. Hey, Brandon, you want to try again?
Can you hear me?
What about now?
Can you hear me? No. You can?
I think it's the same problem.
I don't know if HQ can hear me though.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
Is that better?
I think we did it. Yeah. Or you did it.
Brandon?
Yeah? Yeah. No?
It's better. It's better.
I think that's
It's
it.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah?
Hey.
Okay. All right.
All right. What's up, Brandon?
All right.
All right, we're live. I was just saying that so the company that I co-founded is already live. We launched in last May, but so we're like not really doing user interviews. But I was saying I'm trying to just bring up the company and like our mission whenever I can. So it helps us like refine like where we're headed and just bring me up to speed on like what I need to think about in a similar way. So in that sense, I'm trying to use it as much as I can.
Nice. That's great. Yeah, I think it's, I really appreciate, especially the fact that you're in the growth stage of your company does not mean that you should stop talking to customers by any means. And I love that you're using that framework because your business, I'm sure, is changing. Just for everyone in the room, what do you do quickly? I think that would be great if we do have people speaking just to say what you're working on.
Of course. All right. So I can hear that. I co-founded a sustainable, purpose-driven loungewear brand earlier this year called For Others. And we donated proceeds for 3 items sold back into the community it was purchased in through partnerships with local charities. So it's sustainable, everything's 100% organic. There's a give back component, and those are the 2 pillars for us. And so we're trying to figure out exactly how to get the product out. We had a lot of support initially from friends and family, but now we're like, how do we introduce the product to people who don't know about us, who don't know us personally? And so that's where the user interviews come into play. It's like, how do we build that brand?
No, awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Well, if you haven't done your user interviews just yet, I've recently I sent out Caitlin's presentation today. I'll send out presentations a little bit sooner after the sessions, but you'll have the frameworks that we were taught last time, so you could use that as a guideline. But today we're talking about prototyping, and like a mindset that I like to think about when I'm prototyping is about being dangerous. So I want OnRamp to get dangerous with our prototyping. And being dangerous is really a mindset, right? Prototyping is a communication tool, right? It's a means to get what's in your head outside to the physical world to get valuable feedback from. I have a bunch of my prototypes in person and I'll definitely show them virtually. And sometimes as founders, you might have this awesome idea, but you're like, how the heck do I do this? You know, how do I build this iPhone app if I'm not a coder? Or how do I build this product if I'm not an engineer? So being dangerous is about developing your personal skill set, developing your creative confidence in thinking outside of the box. And in terms of, approaching a problem to solve it with what resources you have at hand. So it's not really about, oh man, like I don't have this injection molded pieces of plastic available to me to build this communication device. It's like, all right, like what do I have at home to start building it so people start understanding my idea? Because oftentimes when you're starting off and you're sharing your business idea or your solution, it really looks like this. It's, it's this convoluted mess of trying to describe exactly what something does, and the other person on the other end probably doesn't receive it as well as you had hoped. And it's pretty frustrating when that happens. And a prototype is a communication tool to help you get there better. So hopefully when you have that conversation, it's this person with the idea, and oftentimes it's either a customer, maybe a developer, maybe an investor they are trying to communicate with, and you want it to be more of a symbiotic relationship that they are able to easily grasp the task or the object at hand. Now, there's all different types of prototypes, right? And depending on what type of business you have, it's going to look different for your solution. So for an app per se, you can really start off with a piece of pen and a paper in terms of how things are laid out. Where do you want the buttons? You know, where's the back button? Very basic things that you don't need to start by coding right away. If you want to build a hardware product, you know, the picture on the right is the prototype for the Nest. You know, it's some Arduinos, which are open source hardware packages that you could source with like breadboards and some screens. If you're building a space like a restaurant or co-working space, you know, it might look like a layout of furniture that you play around with. For service-oriented businesses, that's actually me at like a flea market trying to talk to customers, but it might be instead of setting up like an online learning community at first, it might be setting up a table at a trade show or putting out a flyer to see how many responses you get. So prototyping looks different for all different stages. And we could dig into like each one eventually, like throughout this conversation. There's really 3 ways to look at prototypes or to test them. And this is what you want to think of when you are building them out in your own way. So there are looks-like prototypes. A looks-like prototype is exactly how it sounds. It's something that is trying to get out the concept of what this solution will look and feel like, or it's how you present the information. So for an app, it might be, you know, where the buttons are located, or like where you want your logo, or like what's the first screen that you see. For a physical product, it might be the shape and the weight or the color of your product. For a works-like prototype, you're focusing on functionality, right? So these are 2 separate objects. So it's like if you want to build an app that tells you where you are located, you want to be able to somehow mimic that functionality within the product. Or if you're creating something that is tracking, you know, how much light is in a room and a button needs to like turn on, like what is supposed to happen when the customer is interacting with that prototype. An acts-like prototype is a combo of both. It's still not your finished product, but it's something that is combining what it looks like and how it works, so it's closer to what a finished product would look like.
I'm sorry, Jessie, excuse me. Can we zoom in on the presentation screen a little bit?
Great question. Is that?
Perfect.
Oh, there we go.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. All right. So there's a couple of parameters for success with testing them. And by testing them, I mean it's by going back to your customers, going back to your users, and getting feedback from them. So first, you really have to understand what you are trying to build and making sure that you're not you're not stepping into another category. So for a physical product, like for my device, I was creating a head impact indicator. So success for us was the device is going to change a color after a certain force level was read. And if it was able to do that, that was success for our prototype. For our software, it might be, you know, the app is able to tell me what location I'm in and I want to send that location to a friend. For a space, like say you're building like a restaurant or a co-working space or something along those lines, it's, you know, maybe my goal is I want people to play board games for 2 hours at most so they could, you know, enjoy their time while they're there. And for service, it's really more about, am I able to attract customers and retain them on a continuous basis for that service? Key things with prototypes: start scrappy. Like, I can't emphasize this more. It's like, the less money you spend on a prototype, the better, because prototypes, like I have a box to the right of me with literally 50 different iterations of my prototypes, and they add up over time. So like the key thing is to be able to do it rapidly and affordably, as best as possible. The other thing with prototypes and obviously testing them out in public is hitting the ground in terms of talking with people and doing those interviews. Like last session, we really focused on collecting surveys from people on the internet isn't really doing customer validation. It's having interviews and conversations with people to get that feedback. Take advantage, like I try to take advantage of free spaces and events in your community for that too. And when you're prototyping and when you're having these prototyping interviews, like the biggest thing is collecting data from it. So if you're telling people, hey, I could teach you how to code and, you know, this is a service I want to provide to you, like how many email signups or how many emails are people willing to give you, right? If you are trying to start a nonprofit and you want people to, you know, join your organization, like if you post a flyer, like how many callbacks do you get? If people like your product and you say, hey, like I have this app, I want, you know, I really want to use it, are people willing to pay you for it? And start thinking about repeatability, right? Like in terms of, are people coming back to you? So those are things like I personally track when working with prototypes. And I do it old school. I like notebooks, but you could do that in forms, things like that. Also, when you're testing out prototypes, when you're showing someone, hey, like this is what I made, like what do you think of it? Try not to sell, which I know is counterintuitive, because you're always trying to sell your service, but it's more about receiving feedback, because at that point, if you're selling, you're like, this is what I'm giving you, and there's nothing that's going to change about it. But if you're really trying to be observant with your prototyping and get feedback to make it better, it's more about what they could add to that conversation. So I want you to keep these things in mind when you're gathering feedback. And I have a couple of examples we'll run through just to see how like this is played out. And we're going to do a little partnership exercise where we'll do this. So when you're presenting or trying to solicit feedback, try to ask what they liked, what they disliked. You know, use prompts like if I wish, like if you could wish for something that would be different about this, like what would it be? What if this had this feature? Use those types of prompts for soliciting feedback. Going to like the right people is also a big factor. Say you're using, and I put like consider extreme users for those types of people to interview. So if you're building a new shopping cart for the supermarket, maybe you don't want to talk to the person that only goes to the supermarket once every 3 weeks, you know, that hates going to the supermarket. But maybe there's someone that goes every day or every other day. Those are the people that you want to start with to get a better understanding of usability for your product. Neutrality is like a huge factor with it. You try to be like unbiased when you're presenting. And, you know, if I give my prototype from one of my first days to say Mariella over here, and I'm like, what do you think about this? And Mariella might be like, well, this looks like crap, you know, like what the heck am I looking at? I might get defensive and be like, whoa, like I spent 10 hours on that prototype or more, and like that thing's gonna change the world. That's gonna detect concussions. Like if you're defensive when you're presenting your prototype, you lose a lot of opportunity. So just know, like, I know that none of these things here or none of these prototypes are finished. So just don't take it personally, don't get defensive, or try not to, because like I know a lot of effort goes into it, but it's really counterintuitive for that. And then probe further. Like if someone does say, if Mariella came back to me and was like, yeah, this looks like crap, you know, and be like, why is that? Like try to dig in deeper, like what Caitlin was saying last week, like why? Just hone in on the why. Because then you might get to it that it's just like, oh, well, the size is too big. That's why I don't like it, or something like that. When doing these interviews, you want to be really adaptable and try to think outside the box. So like I know for a fact when I was doing like my interviews for my product, I was presenting everyone a mouth guard. And I was like, hey, like, what do you think about this mouth guard? And then everyone was like, I hate this mouth guard. And I was like, oh, but you know, like, but what if it attached to your helmet? What if it attached to your gear? What if, you know, you could ask those questions. You don't have to go back to them with that exact thing at the same time. Definitely take in their ideas, you know, like not all, look, everyone has an opinion, everyone has an idea, but write it down. You never know if it's worth exploring. You never know if that's the missing part that you want to incorporate. And then the last thing that I really like to do when doing prototype feedback is observe body language. Like if you hand someone a product or even a business card or a flyer, or if you're showing, say you have an app idea and it's a piece of paper, and if you see how people interact with it, if they like it, they're gonna touch it a lot. They're gonna look at it closely. They're gonna be into it. If they're like, oh, that's cool, put it down, like pick up on the subtleties of what they're not saying in terms of the feedback that they're giving, because they might not be like, you know, Marielle is my friend, she might not want to hurt your feelings, and she's like, oh, Jessie, like, this is great, and then just tosses it to the side. I'm gonna be like, all right, well, maybe Mariella didn't like my idea as much as I thought they did.
Sometimes it's best not, when you prototype something, don't go to friends or acquaintances or family. You got to go to like strangers or just far acquaintances, because that keeps everything less biased.
Absolutely, Eric. I think that's where going really to try to find where your customers are, and like thinking about like, where do your customers live? Like where do, like, you know, where do they go to shop? Where do they, you know, where are they going, and try to meet them there. All right, so I want to show you how prototyping has worked out in my company. So my company's Tezuda. We build a head impact indicator for concussion awareness, but my looks like prototypes really started off like with model magic clay. I can pass some of those around if you guys are interested.
Those mouth guards?
Those are mouth guards. Those are mouth guards. But like at the time of starting, I didn't know how to make a mouth guard, but I had clay. So that's what I started off with. And then I wanted to build something that would change colors. And so these are different iterations of what I thought the product would look like that I presented to people. So the one on the bottom, like people were like, this kind of looks like a battery, you know, like this is kind of like a weird shape. Then I made it smaller, and I was like, and people were like, I can't see that, like it's too small if I want to see like a color change. And then we're like, all right, like let's make this bigger, let's make this a little cooler, and we made like that version on the bottom with the V. And those are all 3D printed. None of that was an actual like finished prototype. So you could go pretty far with making something that looks like what you're trying to do. Then I had to build works like prototypes, right? Like it was one thing to get feedback on if people wanted to incorporate this onto their helmet, but my product needed to change color after a force was felt. And we went through like 3 different divisions of that iteration. The first one on the left was basically a ball breaking a piece of saran wrap that would change colors and dye would be in there. And then we thought of these like spiky balls, like what if, because like your brain moves independently in your head. So like what if these spiky balls would break a barrier somehow, and then show a change of colors. Then we had the opposite. We had like a ball. It's like basically a paintball with spikes. Yeah, like with spikes that.
Yeah, those look like the ones, the handle ones.
What?
Those look like the ones, the handle ones.
Yes. Oh yeah, some of these are in a little rough shape. But then we're like, all right, so doing that, so we're like, all right, this is really cool. It worked, but it was really hard to get it to go off because my parameter for success was it had to go off at a specific rate. I couldn't figure that out with the tube or like the cube one. But then we got into magnets and we're like, oh my gosh, magnets are awesome. We can figure out how strong their pull force was, all this stuff. Well, no, it's all good. How strong their pull force was, and we were able to get that to work. So that was where, you know, some of those green and blue ones came into play. So we were actually able to get those devices to go off when we wanted to. When we actually did field testing with them, they failed horribly in terms of like rotational axis, but it was great because then we found springs, which those last 2 prototypes were at the end. So it was really like an involvement to find which mechanism to get it to work the way we wanted to.
These things go on helmets?
They go on helmets, yeah. They change colors if you get hit too hard. So this is the final version of that.
Oh, okay.
Here you go. Here you go. And then basically once we had the works like and acts like prototype, I'm sorry, the looks like and the works like prototype, we made an acts like prototype. So we actually started doing field testing with those little magnet guys on the left. And then once we figured out that the magnets weren't as great of a solution, we moved towards the spring. I got it. Okay. We moved towards the spring prototype. So we found out like we were able to detect forces from any direction, linear rotationally. It was going to change colors, and we're like, all right, this is the product we're going to market with. And that is what you see at the bottom, and that's like what attaches to helmets today. So that was just my personal journey, and it took a really long time. I'm not gonna like lie about that. It took a lot of iteration, but we spent so much time in the creative, iterative prototyping phase that now that we are in market, our product is doing very well. Which I'm really proud about.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. And other things too, it's like, don't forget the other details, right? So it's like, once you got a finished product, it's like, what's it going to be in? Don't forget about the packaging, right? So originally we wanted to sell our product in these small e-commerce boxes because we're like less waste, easier to ship, get them out. But when we went to retail stores, they were like too small. People are going to steal these, right? Like, you know, like think about that. So that's why we ended up with some sort of retail like clamshell, which is a lot for a small thing. But you don't want to forget about those details with a physical good. And don't fall in love with your prototypes, right? Like clearly there's a lot of different iterations. These are actually all my prototypes. I have what I call a graveyard, and I put all of them in, and
How many prototypes, if you can remember?
I have thousands. Well, like for For
For
our
this
device, for our device in particular, this won't be the case for everyone. For our device, it's like, it's one-time use because it was a color change. And we needed to make it go off at the right rate. So we would test it hundreds of times. Yeah. Are you still reading?
No,
No. Yeah. So, and like there were like, I loved the mouth guard. I loved the magnet. I loved all of these things at different stages. And it was really hard to be like, wow, like the magnet effing sucks, you know, like I don't want to do this. But it got us to where we're going, right? It got us to that next stage. And I, you know, like my suggestion to you during this prototyping journey, I have a little cigar box. I keep a different prototype from each different iteration in this box as just a reminder of where we came from. And it's really nice to have for moments like these to reflect like, yeah, like this is what it took to get there. So now I want to shift gears a little bit.
I was just curious about how much you looked around in the world when you're trying to prototype and looked for solutions out there, you know, inspiration, so to speak, while you were doing all this. I was guessing that the end product was inspired by the things that like shipping products that have these whatever, it's been shaking too much.
Yeah.
Attachments.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Which I thought was fantastic. So
yeah, no, like I think innovation does not need to be reinventing the wheel, right? It's just more about adding something to it, maybe taking something away from it. And you hit the, you know, nail on the head in terms of my inspiration. So at first I wanted to build something electronic and IoT based, right? That was my first step forward. And when I realized people didn't want that from my customer interviews, I was just thinking like, what's the opposite of electronic in a very basic way? And I was like, non-electronic, right? Like that was it. I was just, what's the opposite of this? Non-electronic. And then I found shock watch shipping sensors. And I was like, oh, awesome. I'm gonna put these little devices into my product and I'm done. That's my product. They weren't that easy to incorporate because they were glass and all these things, but it
probably not that precise either.
Not that precise, but you were right though. Like I looked at other products out there and I was like, what can I learn from shock watch? Shock watch only worked in one direction. I needed to work in every direction. They only did linear impact. They needed to do rotational. So definitely look from inspiration from other places, 100%, because you could say like, oh, like, what do I love about this app? Or like, what do I love about going to this store? And take inspiration from other places. I wanted to talk about DoorDash, to use an example as like a software-based or a service-based company and how they prototyped early on. So DoorDash was started by Stanford students, and they wanted to be the last mile FedEx. They wanted to be a shipping and logistics company. And so they went to merchants in the area and they were like, you know, talking to people during customer interviews, and they realized that a lot of these local stores in Palo Alto couldn't fulfill deliveries themselves. So they didn't start off by coding something or programming something. They started off with a free WordPress website and a Google form, and they posted flyers around Stanford saying that they offered delivery, from these places that never offered delivery before. So like McDonald's, Taco Bell, some local shops in Palo Alto. The big difference is that the founders had a car, and they just started offering delivery to these restaurants for free. So at that point, they were just trying to collect data. How many restaurants would sign up? How many customers would do this? So they would fulfill all these fulfill all these orders themselves. They only focus on a small area, and they realized, whoa, we have something here. But like I said, you see, DoorDash as the app today, but it did not start as an app. by any means. And it looked like something like this. Like it started off with paper prototypes about where, like what the multiple screens look like. If you just Google like iPhone layout, you could get a printout that you could print out a couple, or if you don't have a printer, you could just use pen and paper at home, and you start thinking about the different screens or the different modules you want to go through. The next step they went through was wireframing. So it's like, so that was their layout for their looks like prototype. Then they needed some functionality. So if I click on, you know, this button, what opens up? What comes after that? And then there was refinement in terms of, all right, we have something good. We have our wireframe, we have our works like. Then they started some imagery, and they were able to raise capital at this point in time in terms of having a looks and acts like prototype, but there was actually no coding behind DoorDash still. It was still working off of WordPress and Google Forms.
Like basically just like prefabricated sites that
Yeah, you could do so much with prefabricated sites, especially like, because I always hear this from people who are like, I have this great app idea, but I don't know how to code. You don't have to code right away. You don't. Like you could lay stuff out to get your vision across. So then when you want to code or hire a developer or find someone, you have the tools to be like, hey, like this is what my customers want. This is what's been resonating really well. And with app-based type prototypes, like when you're doing these customer interviews, if at all possible, if you're looking at how they're interacting with the paper, you know, try to pick up on stuff like, all right, if you want to go back to the home screen, like where would they go? See where they're touching on the pieces of paper, because maybe it's not where you thought they should be. Yes.
I have a question. So what about when you create a new way how to do things, but there are like internal things that the final customer is not gonna see it? Let's say I'm working with some products that come from Peru. I am from Peru. So, but what I found is like, okay, the people here, you buy whatever, chocolate, coffee, and you don't care what is behind that. So in that case, where are we putting innovation? Because we know that innovation could be like the distribution process, the way how you process the product per se, and other many things that you can do. But is this so should we put emphasis in marketing in this case, of how we gonna let them know that we are doing things differently and how we are making this innovation in our services? So that's my question.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great question. I think so for something like that, where, you know, you could get coffee and chocolate from anywhere, right? In theory, like, you know, there's lots of places you could source from it. But if your value that you're creating for your business is how it's sourced or where it comes from and the story, maybe you're focusing on the person that makes that chocolate or that coffee, like that should definitely be presented in your prototype somehow. So for you, it might be packaging prototyping, where it's like, maybe you show the picture of the coffee maker on the front of the package instead of hiding it on the back, or you put it on the forefront of the website, and you could test things out and you could show multiple things at the same time. Like, all right, this coffee has a logo and says, you know, made in Peru, or this one has a picture of a person, like which one do they pick up first? Or you could definitely play with your branding during prototyping. And that kind of goes back to my slide about packaging too. That's a huge aspect of the prototyping step.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, cool.
I mean, isn't that something like your users tell you too? Like, oh, this reminds me of, or how is this different from?
Absolutely.
Like I was getting, you know, those questions help you understand how you're not unique, or if you are unique, how you need to do a better job explaining that you are different.
Yeah, this is something that it really comes down to your value proposition.
Right.
And it's like, what is different from the value I'm providing
compared to
someone else?
Right.
Yeah, but I love to pick up on cues like that as well. So really great. All right, so now we're gonna partner up at this point, right? I think now's a perfect time. We're gonna break out into groups of 2, and you're gonna introduce yourself, introduce what you're working on, and if you don't have your prototype in front of you, or if you don't have a prototype, that's fine. Try to talk through your idea. We gave you some actionable insights as to how to present your idea, how to be neutral about it. Try to take that into consideration and ask for feedback. Ask, what do you like about this? What don't you like about this? And then we'll switch, and we'll do that for about 6 minutes. So I know Emily's gonna break out the group.
In the virtual world.
In the virtual world.
I'm not a founder. No, I'm not in the core. I'm just like, I'm the lawyer who does office hours. So I just kind of came here.
No, that's cool.
Hear the founders and, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I could be a commenter on the prototype without insulting anyone.
I'm in the same boat. Sitting in, but.
You're a founder, you're a company owner.
All right, so.
I have a question.
I'm just sitting in.
Okay, questions really quick before we break up.
Yeah, so for the prototype, so how do you think about it if it's like a disrupting product versus a completely new idea for a product? So like if you're creating a prototype like DoorDash, right?
Yeah.
So like when they came, like when they were invented, like they were more like a new idea, right? So like their prototype, they could create kind of that method to get validation from the customers, because there wasn't like what's like a competitor like Uber Eats, like when they were creating, wasn't Uber Eats at the time, you know what I mean? Compared to like a new company or a disrupting company. So if I'm trying to create like say I'm creating a gym, and there's already gyms out there, so people have an idea of what they're expecting out of that gym industry. So like how in depth does your prototype have to be to meet the customer's expectations versus like a new idea versus like an existing kind of product? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think so. So there's 2 things. Like as much as, you know, DoorDash was disruptive because they were bringing delivery to a new place, delivery food had existed at this point. It's more that they were just offering it to stores that didn't have it, right? So people had an expectation. I put an order in, I get my food on time, I'm a happy customer. So they like had that parameter for success. So I think even if your idea might be a little out there, there are different parts of your product that probably have existed already. Does that make sense? So like you could have prototypes for different things, like the looks like, the feels like, the acts like, and sometimes you just want to, especially for like more robust products, like a laptop or something technical, you might just tell the person you're interviewing, hey, like I really just want you to tell me how the keyboard works today. Or I want you to tell me like how the visuals are on the screen. So you could direct them if that's helpful.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, so are we?
Yeah, rooms are open.
Rooms are open, we're paired up. Let's do in here. Can we pair up in 2s? Yeah, so let's just talk to our neighbor in terms of introduce yourself to your neighbor.
You guys are founders. You should.
My name's
I'm gonna set a timer.
Sorry, I just want to be there.
All right, I know you guys were all very engaged in your prototype interviews, and I know our breakout sessions were all doing that. So thank you so much. I think this is a really interesting part. So now I want to hear, you know, how they went. So would one group like to volunteer and talk about how their prototype interview went? And talk about how the person you were working with presented their idea and give them some feedback and share with the group. Any chat, any volunteers? If not, I'm gonna, all right.
I'm happy to start.
All right, Sean.
Yeah.
Kick off, please.
So and look, I was sitting there with oh, I got a little echo there.
We're working on it. Why don't you just mute and I'll turn my volume up.
Okay. All right, excellent. Hopefully everybody can hear me. So I sat and I spoke with Stamantina. Hopefully I said the name right. It's a wonderful name. And actually, she doesn't have a prototype, but I think it was important for me just to get her idea out there because I think it's a very important idea. And I think, there's some work to be done, but I think she's going in the right direction. So she's a former school teacher. So she has a very unique love for teaching. And in her travels in her career and endeavors, she's noticed a big concern in relation to trash population and population control and how it impacts our environments. And so what she's trying to do based on her skill set in the education field is try to create some environmental educations learnings there. And she's trying to make a decision to go between a nonprofit or an LLC. And then still, working through the phases of does the target audience, meaning should it be preschool or people at that infancy level. The feedback that I've given to her is I think that number one, she's identified a true problem based on what we've heard economically about global warming, how we're managing our environments and so on. And the solution would be obviously, educating people on the best practices in relation to, trash and pollution and so on. I've also given her feedback from a perspective of nonprofit versus LLC. I've had some conversations with some colleagues in this call in relation, about nonprofits. So I think for what she's trying to do and speaking about the revenue that she's looking to make to kind of, sustain herself in the market, maybe she would move more towards an LLC so she can have the controls that she's looking for, financially, decision-making, and so on and so forth. And then the additional feedback that I gave her for her target audience, I think that, working with preschool kids with something like environmental education, I don't think they would have a conceptual understanding of the value add that she would be bringing to them. I think that it would, it wouldn't put her at a strong starting position, because if any negative feedback came from that for that particular group in the education space, maybe she would block opportunities to speak to people at a higher level. So I think what she'd likely probably be doing is looking to more focus on that college environment or current institutions out there already offering some type of educational training where people could really look at the value add that she's trying to bring, create some different type of classes and structures to drive in that revenue. But again, she doesn't have a prototype, but I thought it was worth mentioning. It's unique. I've actually never heard of it before. So I just wanted to highlight that on her behalf. And Stamantina, I hope that I've captured everything properly. And if I haven't, please feel free to correct me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was great. Yeah, so pretty much I used to be a teacher or an assistant teacher pre-COVID, and trying to start an environmental education program that will be in every neighborhood. And my first, conflict or main issue that I'd like to tackle is trash pollution and just our general relationship to our our immediate environment, our communities, our neighborhoods. A straw wrapper isn't really just a straw wrapper. It's trash. It goes into our food system, our water system. So yeah, thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate that a lot. Should I go ahead, y'all?
You can pass it on to someone else. What I'm doing is really not that exciting. I'd like to hear some other ideas out there.
I thought it was exciting. Well, I will say Sean told me he is working on a program that will work with teens and kids or teens who have correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, kids or teens who are currently in detention facilities or have gotten in trouble, and it will create education opportunities while they're in the facility and then prepare them for an additional program when they get out to help them move forward with their lives and job.
Yeah, I think you captured it. There was a little background, but in the long and short end of it is the transitional from corrections into career facing opportunities. That's the goal. Yeah.
All right, everyone, we're dealing with a lot of echo in the room, so I just want to thank Sean and Tina for sharing. Venture Café, mute yourself. We hear you. We are. There's a random microphone in the room that we're trying to figure out. So thank you for your patience with all of this. But I think
hashtag find the mic.
Hashtag find the mic. We're prototyping how to do hybrid still. So so with that being said, like, I guess like the one thing to think about when you're prototyping is what you would do differently during that interview, right? You could kind of prototype your prototype interview in terms of how you present information. So if I were to ask someone what's 5 + 5, right? It's 10, right? That's the answer I expect when I present someone with that. But if I ask someone what plus what equals 10, there is an infinite amount of answers to this question. It could be decimals, it could be fractions, it could be whole numbers, it could be negative numbers. So, always take your prototyping opportunity to reframe your questions. And during prototyping, like, especially when you start liking one of your solutions a lot, it's time to kind of push yourself to be a little bit more creative, especially when you're not getting the response you wanted or it's not working the way that you want. So I have a couple of tips. I don't think I'm sharing anymore.
You are. Did it delay?
I just got kicked off of Wi-Fi. It's all good. Are
you on CIC?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. I got kicked off. Well, let me just chat through this. So the whole idea is like to reframe. There's a way to reframe your questions, right? Think of options, questions your questions. Think about connecting and combining ideas that already exist in the world. So I know these examples are a little silly, but you have shoes with like a dustpan and a little like broom that like someone put together to like, clean up around their house. And you have this woman with heels with like umbrellas on them. And like there are two existing ideas out in the world and you combine them. And sometimes in surprising ways, you could find really interesting solutions. So it's very playful to think in this manner, but I think this really helps with prototyping when you're at a loss for creativity. Like there's ways to like trick your brain into thinking that. Always challenge assumptions when you're talking to people as well. Like, why do you want to do this a certain way? Or like, why are you using a product in a certain manner? Like, why do you always bring a water bottle with you to a place that offers free beverages? Like, ask those questions, because you don't know, like, you know, maybe you don't like any of the offerings that they have here or something like that, but challenge those assumptions. We talked about observation and just being present. Like, there's such power in just like learning and taking in what's around you. And my big takeaway is being a quilt maker, not a puzzle builder for prototyping. So oftentimes we look at a problem and we're like, I want to solve this puzzle. I want to find that missing piece of the puzzle, and I want my solution to be like that missing piece. But when you're prototyping, it's really about look at the resources you have around you and how do you put them together to build something out of that.
I really love what you're saying right now because of like observing, right? Like, not for me, I'm building a service, and so it requires like a lot of observation of human behaviors and how to mitigate for that and provide solutions, right? And what I'm finding is that some of the people I talk to about like the typical behaviors and how they're barriers, like they're not even aware that people do those things until I say, haven't you noticed, like, this happens, people do this, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's surely what happens. And then so it really comes down, I think, to like observing how people actually do things and
yes,
planning accordingly.
Well, yeah, because like
not how they say they want to do things.
Absolutely, it's always about observing, because I could say I'm a prompt person. Like, I always arrive on time. I'm always, you know, there. But in reality, if you watched me for a week and see what time I show up to things, you're gonna be like, Jessie, like, you're usually running a little bit behind, you know, like you're like, that's like my reality. Like, I might be saying like, yeah, like I'll be there, I'm on time, but what you would observe is probably something different. And I think that's really critical for services. Like, I love people watching. Almost went to school that had a people watching club, so that's a whole like other story. People watching club. Yes.
How does that work?
So you just sit and you watch, and well, it's such a interesting.
But then you typically write about what you know.
Well, that too. So like usually if you sit on a park bench or something, our go-tos are phone, right? You pull up your phone and you're distracted from what's happening around you. But if you were to actually sit there and you're like, well, how many people just walked by me? You know, how many people under the age of 10 just walked by me? How many people were going in this direction or that direction? Like, you could just take in so much in such a short period of time. And it's because you're not distracted by the usual distractions. So I think that's huge with prototyping and seeing how people interact with things or do things. So I want to touch on this very briefly. Is prototyping your business model, right? So far we've talked about our solutions in terms of this. This is something called the business model canvas. I'm not sure, has anyone in the room or out there familiar with this tool? Yeah. All right, cool. So business model canvas is one of my favorite go-tos for your business. It's an evolving tool that you could use at different pieces. So it has different stages for your business model, and it's driving home, like, now you have what your customers are, you have what your solutions think, what you're thinking of, but it helps you iterate what value are you driving home, what customers are you creating value for, how are you reaching those customers, how do you keep and grow those relationships, and how are you going to make money, revenue streams, who are key partners and players that you need to work with in order to get your business idea out there, and then some key activities that what you need to do for your business. So if I'm building a bakery, like, I need to be cooking, baking cookies every day. That's key to my business. If I'm building indicators, I have to make those every day. What are some key resources that you need? And then what's the cost structure behind it? So everyone's business model is going to be different. And I sent out a version of this for you to fill out in your own time. My favorite way to do this is with Post-it notes, because your business is going to change at different stages and you might want to play with it. Like you might have the assumption that teachers are my customer segment. So you put your, teachers up as your customer segment, but then you realize, wait, it actually might be the school administrator, or it might be the principal, or it might be, people like that. So I put the DoorDash business model canvas as an example. And then what I want you to do for next week is try to spend some time and work on your business model canvas. We'll try to dig into what your business models really look like. And we'll go through at least one or two at the start of next week's session to kick this off. So
I think you need key, like in addition to key partners, you need like key haters. There's going to be haters. If you're successful, like I noticed this with Oatly. Like I was like, Oatly's awesome. It was like kicking butt in the store. You can't even find it on the shelves. Oatly, the oat milk. Then everybody started making oat milk and actually copied their packaging and their colors. Like the haters swarmed in to respond,
Well, I think No, keep going.
I mean, haters is a little dramatic, but I mean like the competitors, right? Like who are you threatening and how will they respond?
I think that's absolutely critical with business. I know that's not on the business model canvas itself, but you should be aware of who are people playing in your field, who are your competitors. One, so you know how to differentiate yourself. Don't become obsessed with your competitors either, but it's good to know, because one, investor, if you are going down the pathway where you want to seek investment, investors want to know who are your competitors. That's always a question.
And then why you're different.
And then why. And
if your investor doesn't know who your competitors are, they haven't done their homework.
Well, that too. Mariella. Yeah.
So one thing that it is very confusing, at least for me and for those people who are minorities, it's like, okay, my competitors have a lot of money and I would be afraid of them. So I think that this kind of opportunities like Venture Café and OnRamp are helping us, and thank you for that. But the fear is still there. So how you cannot pay attention when they have maybe more money, they have more connections, and they have more resources in general. So yeah, it's a tricky way. I'm sorry, I don't want to put like a lot of thinking about this, but yeah.
No, I think it's so important. And I'm sorry if I mitigated competitors, like don't think about them. It's true. You need to be aware of what your competitors are doing and what they're doing. Because there's a lot that you could learn from them in terms of like who are like for example, like you were talking about chocolate and coffee before, right? And you were saying like there's huge brands like Folgers, and do they know where their coffee's coming from? Probably not. And it's just like trying to figure out what makes you special. Because like maybe your goal isn't to grow to be Folgers, right? But maybe you want to service a certain niche of the market that they're missing. Like they're missing the people that care about where they're sourcing it from, because they're so big and they just care about their bottom line. So there you could find weaknesses like in your competitors. Like I looked at a competitor to try to incorporate some of their technology into ours in the shipping industry with like Tezuda. And what I realized, I was like, wow, like their tech isn't that good. Like our solution is better, and we offer a more robust thing if they were to choose to go in that direction. So really, really good points. Really good points.
I feel like I wonder on this business model canvas, it's right, it's known as the lean business model canvas. So are entrepreneurs supposed to think about their competitors in a way from day one when they think about what need are they needing? Because why even bother doing your business model if you're not going to go anywhere, and then while they're thinking about this, do they then later again incorporate their competitors in their business model, like, you know, just to follow this thread?
Yeah, well, I think it's really about differentiation, right? So the fact that you're all here and you're in this program is you have this idea of something that's not being done well in the market already, right? So I think that's the first step. And then if you take, like, some people don't do what you're doing, like they don't do the interviews, they just put something out into the world and they see what happens. So if you spend this time early on and like learn how to differentiate and really understand what your users want and don't just solve something in your head, I think that's the advantage. So definitely be aware of them, but focus on you, focus on your customers. And I feel like that helps give you a nice path towards product differentiation.
Yeah, being too aware can make it like a crutch. Like you're at the phase where it's like not that important to think too much about your competitors while you're going out. It's just like,
yeah,
it's like important to know what features they have, but like it like limits your mind and your innovation of your own product if you're always thinking about what's over your shoulder.
Well, a mentality, and I know you have a question, I'll get to you in 1 second.
Sorry,
like a huge mentality that I had to overcome, and I think this is kind of what you were hitting on, Mariella. It's like when I was a rugby player, right, who got a concussion, and I was a global studies major. I was not an engineer at first, right? And I started this company. But so when I was like, man, I have this idea, like I always used to think like, who am I to be doing this, right? Like, I'm not the right person to be doing this. Like, why do this? But then my mentality shift, and it shifted when I was working for another place. I was working for a boss who, just told me what to do. I wasn't happy. I was just, going through the motions. And I was like, man, if this dude could run a business, I could run a business. No, and I swear, that was my moment of like, you know what? There is no one better than me. Like I am not better than you. You are not better than me, but there's no one better than me to be making this product because I believe in it 100%. And that's how you should feel about your business. Or it's like, that's where I want you to get the stage too. It's like, to be confident. It's like, yeah, like, you're not Folgers, but I'm Mariella and I have a great idea for coffee and chocolate. Or I have a great idea for like doing this code. So that's where like, believe in yourself. Like, know that if you put in this work at the early stages, like you could go really far with it. So that's my spiel for the day.
Yeah, and I think you touched on story too. Like Mariella has a story about why she cares about this.
They say Bill Gates is actually a business major, not a computer science major.
Yeah.
The woman has.
But it's your story. Like it's your stories in this. It's your customer stories. All this journey with prototyping. So I don't know if there's any questions in the chat right now, but if not, I have.
There is.
Okay.
It says, if there's time, could we discuss any advice or ideas for prototyping an educational method as opposed to a product?
An educational method instead of. So let's
Or I guess on a larger scale, just the idea of prototyping things that are not physically represented.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take 5 minutes, like about 5 minutes to do that before we wrap up. We have a survey question due. So for an educational process or service, what I would do, like I think if you're in the prototyping stage for that, before you build out a course site, before you build out a curriculum, you might want to like go to your local library and like table and see like how many people would be interested if you're offering X amount of like some sort of course. Like who signs up for your course? Can you get 10 people to sign up for your course? Now it's 10 people signed up. How many people showed up? How many people referred their friend, or are people willing to pay for it? So there's definitely ways to prototype services. And I think the data collection for an education like that is more important, and digging deeper into like your curriculum. So if you're trying to get people to say, I'm using Jason in the crowds like as an example, you know, to code better, right? Like that's your goal. That's like what you're trying to promote through your education. So maybe you should talk to like the top firms that hire programmers. So like Google, Slack, Facebook, they all have certain, you have to pass software tests in terms of your capabilities in order to work there. So maybe it's talking to the people who are best in the business to be like, hey, if we had more people that could do X, Y, Z, we'd be really happy with that because, you know, we'd be able to hire more people that could work at the levels like we're incentivized by. So then you can approach them and be like, hey, if I offered a class that could get more people into your pipeline, like, would you like that? So you can kind of hit it from both ends, from a service or education perspective. I don't know if that was helpful or if anyone else had ideas of how to prototype a service.
Well, I think it also ties into what you're talking about with like the wireframes and kind of mapping out the experience that you could, you know, that you can draw that out physically to show people walking through an experience of what your ideal customer or, you know, a student goes through.
I love that.
With their products. Like I feel like whether you're doing a service or a program that you can map that out physically and say, yeah, would you follow along this path? And you know, where do you see the pain points or what doesn't make sense to you in the same way that you could look at a physical object?
Yeah. No, I think that's wonderful. Like I think that whole experience of the journey while you're doing it is great.
Yeah, Jessie, you said
Yes.
you can start prototyping before you start working in your product. If you just have an idea, you can talk to people and interview them about the product.
Yeah, you don't need to have anything that works to start talking to people. Like that, I'm a big believer in that. And like you could start creating little things that help the conversation, because if it's too confusing that they can't grasp it, that's where it gets harder. So that's where start off simple, start off not spending a lot of money on your prototypes. Did that answer your question or did I miss that?
Well, maybe even before you start spending any time, right? If you just have the idea, you can pitch people on the idea. Is that prototyping or is that just pitching?
I think that is I think that's really customer like validation or customer interviews. Like you could absolutely pitch an idea, but what's hard is if you're pitching my idea and I'm like, I really don't know what you're going after. So it's trying, like once you start having those conversations, start bringing in pieces that help them understand what you're doing better. So maybe it's just like, I want to accomplish these 3 things. And you tell people like, do you understand that? Or like, do you like that? Do you dislike it? So just adding tools to your repertoire to like communicate your idea better. So I think that just makes that stronger when you have something to point to. Cause like, you might be like, oh, like I love robotics and machine learning, but not everyone might get that all the time. Or like, I'm like, I want to make this thing that works non-electronically. And they're like, what are you talking about? So it was easy to say, hey, like, look at this piece of clay and think about that.
Just something basic.
Something basic, piece of paper, clay. You could create videos. You can, it's really what is at your disposal. Anyone else?
I would just add for education or service, like a model lesson or an example of this service, just provide it and see how it goes. I mean, you have all sorts of media that you could do it in, but.
Oh, totally. Like
yeah.
I would say that's a great point. Like maybe offer 5 free workshops and see what the response was. Did they like the curriculum? Would they come back? Then maybe, all right, you're going to host the next 5 workshops, but you're going to like charge people for it. See if people still sign up for it.
Yeah, it's like to be a lawyer, an accountant, whoever, or education, whatever it is, whatever your service is.
Yeah.
I think delivery of the DoorDash delivery.
Yeah. No, I think that's wonderful. All right, we're heading towards time for this session. I just want to thank everyone so much for being an active participant. I'm gonna send this one out. I have some resources at the end of some of my favorite resources for prototyping. But we do have a quick survey, a survey poll. just for next week. Next week, we're going to be, we'll kick off the session, bring your business model canvas. We're going to, talk through that a little bit. And then I'm bringing in a good friend of mine. Her name is Adrienne Butler. She's done HR for some pretty large companies and startups. So we're going to talk about teams. So it's like, all right, now we have the customers, now we're talking about prototyping. What happens when you get to the stage where you can't do everything on your own, right? So how do we start adding team members to your company and with your idea? So keep that in mind. And then
are the PowerPoints posted somewhere?
I emailed the last presentation today, which I will send this presentation out like right now when I leave the room. So I'm just emailing the group if you're signed up. So cool.
All right, well, and thank you everyone for your patience. Hybrid is weird, and we appreciate you all for sticking around. And thank you, Jess, for hosting a wonderful session. And stick around for Startup Roundtable, which will have less issues.